Hi, everybody. This is Alan Fine. I'm here with Leslie Peden, who is the Chief Commercial Officer for Celestyal Cruises. Of course, they're known for their terrific cruises around the Greek Isles and more. We'll discuss that, plus the current situation in the world on Insider Travel Report. Now, where are you and how are you?
Well, I'm down in sunny Florida, so I'm just outside of Orlando right now. And no, all's well. So the family are doing well, everyone's healthy, and hopefully the sunshine is keeping people's spirits up.
So as I thought about what I wanted to talk about with you, as time goes by, I realize the questions will keep changing because the situation keeps changing. Talking to you 2 weeks ago would be different than now, but right now, let bring us up to date on Greece and when did the pandemic hit? What was it like, and how is it now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Greece itself has really outperformed globally in terms of its handling of the pandemic. So in large part, mainly because the Greek authorities took very proactive measures right at the outset. And that's really resulted in very, very minimal confirmed cases, in fact, the lowest in Europe, and the lowest number of deaths as a result. They also shut down the islands and being able to get to the islands, and it was only residents permitted on the islands. So therefore, again, there was actually no contamination in any of the islands, which was also hugely beneficial. And we ourselves took the early decision right at the outset, even though we had started our season on the 29th of February, to actually suspend voluntarily our operations on the 12th of March. And as a result of doing so, we actually were able to, repatriate the crew. So all of our crew got home before the borders shut down, and that was obviously tremendously important to us, to reunite them with their family.
Wow, you
but
were
also
really ahead
get
of
our
the game.
travelers. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you were really ahead of the game.
We wanted to make sure that we put the safety and the health of our crew and our guests right at the forefront of this. And by being very decisive early on, we were able to really get ahead of the curve on this.
So obviously no cruises were interrupted. You made the choice. What was the date again?
So it was the 12th of March that we actually landed up cancelling going into that voluntary suspension period. And the good news is as well, Alan, that even though COVID was out there and known about at that point, we'd immediately put protocols in place for those sailings that we did do, the few that we did operate. And fortunately, they were very effective in preventing any cases of COVID on board any of our ships. So again, it gives us some level of comfort that those protocols that we already put in place were effective ahead of this pandemic growing as it has.
So you're ready to go now, knowing that you were successful up until now.
Now, just on that point, I mean, it's a good point. I think what's happened since then is that more information has come about. So, in the very, very early days, we only knew a very limited amount. As time has progressed, a lot more is known, and new protocols are having to be evolved and developed all the time based upon that scientific evidence that's now emerging.
Well, in a moment, I want to talk about how that manifests on the ship. But right now, as we chronologically go, at this point now, when you canceled some voyages, you had to deal with the guests. And so the cancellations and the postponements and whatever programs you put in place with future cruise credits, let's talk about that and how that went.
Sure. So we've basically been suspending our sailings in sort of 6-week increments because of the exact situation I just mentioned. New information was evolving, and during that time, borders were closing down as well. So since then, it's been a bit of a ongoing situation, understanding various government requirements, various health requirements as well. So we're very engaged at both an industry level with CLIA, as well as with the European and local health authorities in Greece, to understand as an industry what sort of protocols the cruise industry is going to be adhering to, given that the industry already has very, very high standards and protocols in place around sanitation, around making sure the environment on board is very healthy. So these, we need to keep in mind the protocols over and above those already very high standards that the industry has. There's a lot of technology out there as well to be leveraged now, for example, UV lighting and so forth. So again, it's understanding through science the effectiveness of these tools in countering and mitigating the virus itself. So there's a lot of consultation going on, Alan, between industry, between ourselves and authorities as well, to look at what additional protocols will be put in place in order to safely resume service when the time's right. So in order to do so, we've been measured in terms of our cancellations of future sailings, because things have evolved all the time. Right now, we're due to resume service. Our intention is to resume on the 31st of July of this year, and we've cancelled up until that point. For guests that have been impacted by these cancellations, we've offered them a 120% future cruise certificate as well. And just recently, because we are headquartered and we operate in the European jurisdiction as well, it's pretty well documented that a number of European countries, Greece and Cyprus included, have actually come out and enacted their own laws as well to basically safeguard consumer rights. And in doing so, quite recently, we've actually enacted a law, because we're under that jurisdiction, which actually calls for a future cruise certificate. But not only that, it actually has an underlying government guarantee associated with it. So in doing so, the guests and our travel partners know that their guests' money is safe, no matter what. So that in itself should instill a lot of confidence, and it is instilling a lot of confidence in people booking with us as well for the future.
So are you saying that there's actually a government protection on the money spent on a cruise?
There is with Celestyal. I can't speak for the other cruise lines, but because we're domiciled in this European jurisdiction, that is something that we're delighted that obviously the government has taken that action. This is not a Celestyal policy. This is a law that was enacted, but it safeguards Celestyal's guests and our travel partners, and it crosses the tourism spectrum. So everything from airlines with the Aegean, for example, in the region, all the way through to hotels and so forth. So again,
that's a real selling point.
It really is, and it should give people that comfort that irrespective of that voucher being issued, whether they choose to get a cash refund at a future stage, that future stage as part of the law actually is from the 31st of December of 2021. So at that point, they become eligible, those vouchers, for refund, for cash refund, for anyone that doesn't opt to redeem it. But also, Alan, to your earlier question, we are seeing a high adoption and rebooking and redemption of these vouchers. I mean, even at this early stage, we've got a 15% redemption of those vouchers, which is actually very good. And in large part is because a lot of our guests are in the long haul market. So they're traveling from the US, they're traveling from Canada or Latin America, and therefore they've already got their air in place, and therefore they can move their air because the airlines are obviously giving them that flexibility as well. And so we're seeing that people are still very much resilient when it comes to their vacations and also their cruise vacations. You know, we've got a loyal cruiser base globally. Nothing's changed. In fact, we've got many guests saying to us they can't wait to return to the water. And I think one of the big changes we'll see, though, is a lot more multi-generational cruising. So, you know, because families have been in lockdown all of this time, so therefore they want to spend, they really realize the value of family and spending that quality time together now.
You mean they haven't had enough together time? Now they're going to do it overseas on a cruise. That's great.
I think they're rediscovering themselves.
Right. No, that's great. It's a good story. So speaking about the difference in the future, so taking in all the research that you've done and the fact that you, well, first of all, your ratings, I remember you were talking to me about when guests rate the cruises, the cleanliness. Tell us about that, because what I want to talk about is what's going to change since you were already clean.
Yeah, it's a good question. So what you're referring to is our past guest customer satisfaction scores. And so even before COVID was COVID, we were scoring consistently in excess of 96% for cleanliness and hygiene on board the ships, which is quite frankly unheard of. And we're very proud of that fact. I think that's a large contributor as well to the well-being of our guests on board. And so, you know, the new world that we're going to live in is seeing protocols that will go much further than what we're already doing, as I mentioned earlier. So, and you know, these are still evolving. So policies and protocols are still evolving. But, you know, we're talking about pre-screening. So even before guests arrive at the port or even in the country, there's going to be certain probably information that they'll have to provide to ensure their health and well-being as well. We're going to make sure that before they board the ship, that things like temperature checks, again, secondary level screening will be required as well. And, you know, the same applies for our crew on board the ship, because it's not just about the guests, it's about the well-being of the crew. And again, that will be a consistent process where temperatures are checked, even testing as required as well. And that's going to be absolutely paramount as we go forward here. And, you know, having control and working in conjunction with the ports and the terminal facilities is going to be incredibly key as well here, because making sure that guests arrive in a orderly fashion and we don't have the congestion in the ports, same on disembarkation, is going to be key. So making sure the staging for that is correct, adhering to social distancing. Certainly in the short to medium term, whilst we're all waiting for a effective vaccine to be developed. And so, you know, these are all things that have to be looked at and protocols that have to be considered. I think once on board, you know, communication is going to be key as well. Just reminding people to, you know, ensure and practice good hygiene, which is sort of become almost the norm now. But more importantly, measures which see increased frequency of sanitation in high traffic areas, leveraging technology I was mentioning as well. And then also on the shore excursions, that's going to be quite key, because, you know, we have a lot of experiences, as you know, with Celestyal being very destination focused. A lot of our guests are spending a lot of time actually off the ship. And because of that, you know, we're going to be checking people's temperatures as they get on and off the ship again, and back and forth in these destinations. But also, one thing that makes us a little bit different, Alan, as you know, is that we go to a lot of the smaller islands, the smaller destinations where the larger ships typically don't frequent anyway. And because of our ships being sort of small to medium size as well, you know, we can practice social distancing very effectively on there, because it's a less crowded affair anyway. But also we're going to destinations whereby you're not having to worry about a significant number of people in destination.
Remind us ship size, please.
Yeah, so the Crystal, she runs at around 1,000 passengers maximum. Realistically, she normally runs at around 700. I beg your pardon, 800, based on double occupancy.
Will you be limiting the capacity?
At this time, it's not clear. So these are discussions that, again, are still ongoing with the various health authorities. So it really depends on the outcome of those. But right now, making sure that we have adequate accommodation for isolation will obviously be important should there be a case that has to be dealt with. But at the moment, there's no particular guideline at all on that.
But also, if I remember correctly, in all of the cruising you did and with the cleanliness you had, you never had a COVID case.
We did not. So we've had 0 cases, and as I say, we were able to repatriate our crew and get our guests home before the country borders closed down. Now, Greece as a whole, because it did manage the situation so well, is now in a position to reopen, which is the positive in all of this. As of July, in fact, as of mid-June, the borders are reopening to 29 countries. Now, we're hearing that from the 1st of July, the United States should be included within that list. What isn't clear at the moment is the potential requirements for isolation or self-isolation upon arrival. What we do know is that Greece has put very effective measures in place, testing people on arrival, certainly from the more high-risk areas of the world they consider right now, and that's proven to be tremendously effective. So it's just a matter of now understanding when viable airlift will resume, number one, and number two, when the actual ports themselves will reopen, not just in Greece, but obviously in the surrounding region in which we operate as well.
Can you go over what the lift is going to look like for July?
Sure. So airlift for July is starting to recommence, certainly from North America. We're seeing the airlines like American and Delta making announcements that certainly from the mid to latter part of July, they're starting to recommence lift to Europe and also to Greece, which is encouraging. And we are also seeing, because of that, more domestic travel in the US, which is also important to us because a lot of our guests also connect through major hubs in order to get the crossing over to the Atlantic. So we're seeing more and more air being reinstated as well within the domestic US market. And also, very encouragingly, pricing on air travel is actually remaining pretty stable. So there was a lot of concern about airfares spiking, and for a short time they did. But we're actually seeing a far more stable environment for air pricing as well now, which is very encouraging.
You're saying that Greece is opening up. So by the time you commence cruising, all of the land tours and things will all be open, you're feeling?
Yeah. I mean, they've in Greece itself, they've actually already reopened a number of the major attractions. So, like the Acropolis, Parthenon in Athens itself, understanding the social distancing in place and limitation on numbers. However, for us, we've also been adapting our itineraries, Alan. We actually just announced our updated 21 itineraries and also launched 2022. And that's actually seen us in the sort of shoulder months, those winter months now, adjust our popular 3 and 4 night iconic itineraries, and we launched a new one called the Iconic Discovery, which actually reduces the number of islands that we go to, but we're doing full day experiences in all of those islands now. And we've introduced a brand new one called Challis, which is a beautiful island. It's actually got a year-round population as well. It's very open during the winter. And we're in fact adapting our product to introduce walking tours, independent walking tours, leveraging technology, because we also have the Whisper earpieces on all of our excursions anyway, which permits for social distancing, because you don't lose out on that great storytelling that's been given by the tour guides. So that affords guests and the freedom to move around unrestricted. And also, by having more coaching available as well, so thereby ensuring on the coaches frequent sanitation between movements, also reducing the number of guests on the coaches as well to ensure social distancing. So these are measures where we can keep people in a safe and healthy environment off the ship as well as on it.
So you're talking about this new itineraries coming up. So do you have promotions that travel advisors should be aware of?
Absolutely. We just launched, ironically, an Escape to the Future campaign rather than a Back to the Future. And so the Escape to the Future campaign is effective now and runs through July and August. And that allows for reduced fares, which are obviously, we've always been very attractive and represented great value for money because we're all inclusive. So for budgeting purposes, because, we also need to keep in mind that this is as much a financial or economic crisis as it is a health crisis. And therefore, particularly now more than ever, people want to understand the cost of their vacations. And, with us, they're not going to get nickel and dime. There are no hidden extra charges. It's all inclusive. So they've got their classic drinks in there. They've got their gratuities. They've got their select excursions. So therefore, they can budget accordingly. And on top of that, right now, as part of this Escape to the Future campaign, a second guest can travel for 50% off. So it's actually a buy one, get one half price as well. And that applies for both 2021 departures and 2022. We're also doing solo traveler offers, and where we only have a 15% supplement on those sailings as well. And you'll be the first to know this because it only just happened on Friday. But Celestyal, in addition to winning the Solo Traveler Award the last 2 consecutive years, we actually just won the Global Tourism Awards on Friday for Solo Traveler, as well as Platinum Award for our guest experience, which again reinforces, how we really put so much emphasis. Thank you. Thank you. So we're very proud of it. We're very proud of our colleagues on the ship as well that deliver this phenomenal guest experience day in and day out. So again, that's validation of how important we and the priority we place on these things. So in addition to having won the Tourism 2020 Awards for our guest experience, which was actually at the platinum level, in addition to that, we had the Solo Traveler Award. There was actually a third award as well, and that was actually for fam trips and the quality of the fam trips and the experience that our agents also have, which was fantastic recognition as well, because again, the destination and the experience on Celestyal being so different from your typical cruise experience, it really goes some way to highlighting that.
So, I mean, as travel advisors are watching this and they're thinking, gee, I want to go to Greece, isn't it great to know they also won an award for having the best fam trips?
Well, it's great because it has validation that there's value in it for our travel advisor partners, and they're investing time traveling to the destination, so it's vital that they themselves get value out of it, and I think that definitely gives that sort of validation.
And I'm sure you've seen a good return on that investment.
Definitely. I mean, there's nothing better than showing. It's better to walk the talk than anything else. And we'd rather our travel partners and advisors come and experience it. And that's why we already have a very generous program in place over and above our fam trips for travel advisors who want to go on their own vacation with their own family and experience it for themselves, where they get a 60% discount from us on that all-inclusive price.
So we also are aware that you don't just travel to Greece. Do you want to highlight any voyages coming up elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got our eclectic Aegean itinerary, which we've actually slightly adjusted for 21 and 22 now. The biggest change being that we've actually introduced Thessaloniki as a port of call. As you may recall, we introduced that with being the first cruise line back to Istanbul, with an overnight stay in Istanbul on that itinerary. And we've now introduced Thessaloniki because it's a phenomenal region anyway to explore. It's the second largest city after Athens, and there's a lot of history there regarding Alexander the Great. But also, it's a gateway for our guests to join and disembark the ship. Because again, in this new world that we're living in, certainly from Northern and Western Europe, there's a lot of airlift that goes into Thessaloniki. In addition to that, there's a very big drive market around the Balkans as well. And we're seeing a lot of interest and growth in cruising from the Balkan region. So they can simply drive to Thessaloniki to join the ship as well. So we've introduced that as a destination. On our 3 continents, we just did a very minor adjustment in that we go to Egypt there as well as Israel. We did previously have a technical call in Alexandria and then the ship positioned to Port Said. We've done away with that technical call into Alexandria. So we're actually making sure that on all of our itineraries, we're optimizing the time in destination, actually more in the destination than actually on the ship itself.
All right. Well, that's quite robust, and congratulations on that. So, what should travel advisors be doing right now, and what should they be telling their clients as we start to move into this new phase?
Yeah, I think the one piece I would start with is that they need to believe themselves. Cruising is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. It was a phenomenal vacation before COVID, and it's going to be as phenomenal vacation post-COVID. The other piece is that they should take a lot of confidence in the protocols that cruising already had in place in terms of health and hygiene, as we've touched upon already. But as importantly, I think looking to the future, and just to give you an indication, our bookings in the first 5 months of this year are actually significantly up over the first 5 months of 2019 for 2020, to the tune of 66% up, before you actually factor in the redemption of any vouchers from guests that were displaced from this year. When you factor in those guests that have been displaced, that actually jumps 10 points to a 76% increase year over year. So I think that a lot of our travel advisors should take a lot of heart in, and thank you for their support, because without them, that wouldn't be the case. The second piece is that for me, I was really interested in understanding, well, what did we have on the books for 21 before COVID? So in reality, what's happened in this last 8-week period where COVID has really claimed global mention and has an impact. And the long story short is that when I look at the last 8 weeks, we've actually doubled our new business. So from where we were before COVID started to where we are today, we've actually doubled the business. So that in itself just should give people the confidence. In North America, here we're seeing a lot of groups being taken out for 2021 and even 2022. We've got business on the books for 2022. People are planning much further out, so I'd encourage our travel advisors to be engaging with their guests now and with their customers now, because they are dreaming, they're researching, they're looking for inspiration, and when they find that right vacation for them, they're booking. So our numbers support that, so they should take a lot of heart in that.
Well, it sounds like as people are cooped up and they think about where they want to go, Greece comes up on that list pretty high.
It is, and really, one of the big distributors, online distributors, actually did a piece of research recently, which actually showed that Greece was actually the #1 choice in Europe for a vacation in this, COVID, post-COVID environment that we're living through. And that's in large part because Greece in itself has done a phenomenal job in managing the whole outbreak. So we're excited about the future. We're excited about the prospects of cruising. Our mid-sized ships have a large part to play in this because you're not mixing with as many guests. We're just ready to get going as and when the conditions are right. The travel restrictions have been lifted, the ports reopen, it's going to look slightly different as we've discussed, and I'm sure there'll be some level of PPE, personal protection, that will be required, certainly in the initial startups. It's very likely to be a phased startup as well. I don't think any of us think that everything's going to come back to what it was right away, but certainly it will be phased. And there'll be a lot of learnings as well during that phased startup period that we don't know about yet, that everyone will be looking to apply those learnings as well very quickly. The only one thing I was thinking about that I haven't mentioned, which may or may not be interesting, is, during this COVID period, people have become far more aware of their well-being. So, exercising more, their diet as well. And, Greece is also renowned for being a blue zone region. And because of that, Blue Zone, we were already working with Diane Challis from My Greek Table. So many of you may have seen her on PBS. She's got her own show on there. She's just started season 3, in fact, and she's got this outstanding cookbook called My Greek Table, which New York Times has voted a bestseller. And we actually are working very closely with Diane in terms of organizing future trips, which is all very much centered around cuisine, gastronomy, wines in the region of Greece. She's been on board as well and really brought a lot of those experiences back to consumers here in North America. And in fact, she's just become so popular that she's launched down in Australia as well. Her shows have launched down there. And so we'll work very closely with Diane in so much as she's also developing our menus on board the ships. So there's going to be a signature dish from Diane as well. And we're looking, during this period of hibernation, or this year of hibernation so far, Diane's been very active with us, and we've been holding webinars for our travel advisor partners as well as consumers, where Diane is actually talking about Blue Zone healthcare, and she actually has her own cooking school on the island of Icaria in Greece, which actually Icaria was reported recently for the length of life that people have on this island, and they put a lot of it down to the local honey and the pureness of the local honey, and that's a key ingredient in much of the cooking in the region. So Diane talks a lot about this as well on these webinars. So I definitely encourage our travel advisors to keep an eye out. If you're not following us on our closed trade Facebook page or Facebook group, by all means do look us up at Celestial Cruises Agent Talk Americas and request to join there, because you can get a heads up on these webinars that we're doing with Diane, and you just may learn something new about Blue Zone and the way of life.
We wish you guys the best of luck, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you. No, we appreciate that. And, we're all in this together. So we're all going to come out of this together, and we remain very committed to our trade partners, and we thank them for their support throughout this, because we totally appreciate how tough this has been on them as well. So, we will do what we can within the realms and the tools that we have to help them. And, the one last message I would leave them with is, do encourage your guests to utilize and redeem these future cruise travel credits as soon as they possibly can, because there's definitely pent-up demand. We're seeing that in our numbers. And, we want them to make sure that their guests get the first choice of, itinerary, of stateroom category, and also their preferred itinerary and date of travel. So for that reason, definitely encourage your guests to rebook as soon as they're ready and comfortable too.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time, Alan.
And this is Alan Fine for Insider Travel Report.